Hello, everyone, and this week, we're going to be talking about color. I know that many of you have experienced color before. You've probably learned about color in the past, but we were going to talk about color and color theory and some fun stuff about color this week. So first, I wanted to share this with you. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, but these are called color assimilation grids, and these are kind of tricks on our eyes. So all 5 of these images are black and white photos. And if you look closely, what happens here is there are these grids laid on, and these grids are different specific colors that then, when combined with that black and white value there, are tricking our eye into reading that color for that entire object. So that's really obvious or really apparent in the picture on the bottom right in the guy's shirt, where we can see those bands of color, but they're a lot less obvious on like the blue of the man's robes in that front middle picture. So color is something that is a little bit tricky. It tricks or plays with our eyes. And so we're going to look a little bit about where color comes from, what color is, and how that all happens in our eye. And then we're also going to talk about color theory and how we use that in the art world. So there's one of those images closer up. You can see that that is a black and white photo with a colored grid overlaid on top. And when we look at that in a smaller setting, our brain is just instinctively taking those colors and applying that to that entire shape or that entire section of values. So what is color? We're going to talk about color as an element of art. Last week we were looking at the elements of art. It's going to be our first element that we're dealing with this semester. So color is an element of art, and it is produced when light hits an object and is reflected back into the eye. So if I held up these Post-it notes, what's happening is light is hitting this, and then it is being reflected back. The yellow is the only thing that is reflected back. All the other colors are absorbed by the surface of that object. So what we see is a thing called reflective color. Light coming in carries with it kind of all the prisma, the rainbow of colors, all together at once. And so those colors are absorbed by the surface of the object. And so as it hits our eye, light passes into our eyeball and then goes into the cells in the back of our eye. And we've got 2 types of cells back there. We've got cells called rods and cells called cones. We have a lot more rods than we do cones, but rods allow us to see essentially that grayscale, that black and white. They also really help us see in low light situations, and they help us see motion. So if you've ever gotten up in the middle of the night and you walk to the bathroom and it's dark and maybe there's just a little bit of moonlight coming in, you'll probably notice that you don't actually see in color because there's not enough light for those cones to be activated. So that's all your rods picking up trace amounts of lights. Your cones are what's responsible for allowing you to see color. We have 3 types of cones that combined together allow us to see all of the colors that we see. So you can see that we've got red cones, green cones, and blue cones there. So in humans, we have 3 types of cones. We've got red, green, and blue. And that red cone allows us to not only see red, but all those colors that are pulled from red. So if we look at how those colors are mixing there, we've got those colors. A sciencey diagram, you can see that rods are pretty straightforward on the nerve cells at the end, where the cones are a little bit more developed and a little bit more sophisticated. So I want to go on a quick digression here. If we were in the classroom, we would be having all sorts of little Mr. Reynolds digressions. So I want to talk about how our color vision compares to other animals. So you might be familiar with the fact that dogs have not as good vision or not as good color vision. We've got specifically 2 types of color receptors in dogs' eyes. And this is pulled, actually, these images are pulled from a site called The Oatmeal, where an artist and intellectual guy puts together interesting cartoons. But dogs have 2 types of color receptive cones. So they've got green and blue, and that allows dogs to see blues and greens and a little bit of yellow as those are interacting. Butterflies have 5 color receptor cones in their little eyes. And so, in addition to seeing all of the colors that we see, they have 2 other colors and then all of the massive spectrum of colors. And so, butterflies see the world in so much color that we can't even comprehend the world that butterflies see. So, if you have ever seen a butterfly flying around on the garden and you look and they're landing on these really colorful flowers, they're actually seeing more of that color than we can even comprehend exists there because they have 2 extra receptor cones in their eyes. So beyond butterflies and dogs, we're going to go on another little tangent. There's a certain animal that has substantially more photoreceptors in their eyes than anyone else. And so the champion of photoreceptors is a cute little thing called the mantis shrimp. Mantis shrimp are these rainbow, psychedelic-looking little creatures that live in shallow, reefy, watery areas, and they are crazy. So the mantis shrimp has somewhere between 12 and 16 color receptors. So if a butterfly can see colors that we can't even imagine with 5 color receptors in their eyes to our 3, the mantis shrimp is seeing a spectrum that we can't even fathom here. So if you look, we as humans with our 3 color receptors can see this chunk of the wave spectrum. So we can see from sciencey here, waves about down to 400 and then up to 700. Beyond that, we get into the ultraviolet and the infrared type of light. Mantis shrimp can see everywhere from 300 and beyond, and so we can see here some guesstimates of what those colors could be, and this spectrum doesn't even necessarily work or make sense because this is just a mind-boggling amount of stuff. And so beyond that, these mantis shrimp are these crazy little creatures because they can see all of this color, and what do they do with it is they kind of go nuts. They have these punching mandible forearms that they can punch with the same force of a .22 caliber rifle. So just to put that in perspective, if we could move our arm with the same force that these mantis shrimp could, we could take a baseball and we could throw that baseball into orbit. Their punches are also so strong and fast that they superheat the water around as they punch a clam or another crab or something, and it causes the water to boil and then causes these shock waves to come out with it. So even if they miss their prey as they're punching, those shock waves and the change of pressure and temperature in the water oftentimes will kill the creature anyway. They'll punch clams just to crack them open, and then they'll sit there and kind of gorge themselves. They're even so strong that they're not generally held in aquariums because they just kind of go crazy and will punch things and shatter aquarium glass. They have existed on the planet longer than dinosaurs. You can see their crazy little eyes there. They are beautiful, crazy little things. They're monogamous, meaning that once they find a mate, they mate for life, where most animals will kind of mate per season. These mantis shrimp fall in love once, and that is it. But beyond that, they'll kill anything else. So they're one of the few creatures that will kill just for the sake of killing something. Most animals won't kill something unless they're being threatened or unless they're gonna eat it, where mantis shrimp will walk around and if they see a crab walking by, they'll just punch it and then be not even hungry. They just want to kill it for the sake of killing it. So these are these crazy little creatures that are brightly colored. And then beyond, scientists are actually using their little mandible arms in order to build better body armor and to build fighter jets. So those little arms of theirs, you can see his little club arm, can withstand such force that scientists are looking at these and figuring out how to build better military equipment. Okay, I'll get back on topic. We're not talking about mantis shrimp and the craziness of them. We're talking about color. So let's talk color theory. Color theory is how colors are made and how they relate to one another. So we know kind of the science behind color, so we're going to move into the art world. Color theory is crucial for painting or creating imagery or like functioning as a young artist in the world, because it's important to understand how those colors interact and to be able to make those colors if need be. So we've got down at the bottom there a very simple, kind of straightforward color wheel by the philosopher Goethe, as they were trying to figure out initially where color came from. So there, when we talk about color, we're going to start off with this concept of 3 primary colors. And so these are colors from which all other colors are going to be made. So when we're working with paint and we're working with like mixing colors, those primary colors are going to be red, yellow, and blue. So these are pure pigments, meaning that if you don't have red paint or a red pigment, you don't have the ability to make red. If you don't have anything that's blue, you can't mix 2 colors together to make blue. Same with yellow. So primary colors are pure pigment and can't be mixed or made using other colors. If we take our 2 primary colors together and we start mixing those, we get what we call our secondary colors. So primary, Optimus Prime is the first, prime, 1, 2 primary colors together, 1 plus 1 equals 2. Secondary colors, and so our secondary colors are made from mixing primary colors. And so if we mix red and blue together, we're going to get violet, which is kind of what art people generally refer to purple. I'm okay if you want to say purple. I know that those are essentially the same thing. If we mix red and yellow together, we're going to get orange, and if we mix yellow and blue together, we are going to get green. Beyond that, if we start mixing our primary and our secondary colors together, we're going to get our tertiary colors. These are also known as our intermediate colors, but they exist between those primaries and secondaries. And the way that those names work is actually really straightforward, because you're always going to have the primary color first, and then whatever the secondary color to mix that is. So our tertiary colors, and there are 6 of them. They are yellow-green, yellow-orange, red-orange, red-violet, blue-violet, and blue-green. So if you put that all together, you can see how we start to get this concept of the color wheel. Now, just like wheels, there's no top or bottom. What's important is how those colors are positioned in relation to each other. So we've got primary color, yellow. Next to it, it's going to be a tertiary, and then the secondary color that makes that up. We're going to be playing around with the color wheel as our assignment or as our project for this week. So just sit tight. You might be asking yourself, what about black and white? And there's always people who are like, well, my favorite color is black, but black's not a color. In our case, it's going to depend on whether you're talking to someone who's like a physicist or a chemist. So black, when we are mixing, is the presence of all colors. White is going to be the absence of all colors. You can call these colors if you want. I don't mind. You can call them tints and shades or hues or whatever you want word-wise there. If we were talking to someone who's a physicist who's dealing with light, black is the absence of all color and white is the presence of all color, but that's not going to work when we're mixing paint. So know that when we're mixing paint, black is the presence of all colors and white is the absence of all colors. So speaking of whites and blacks, if we mix white with any color, it's going to create a thing called a tint, and a tint is a softer or a lighter version of that color. So like red plus white is going to give us pink, and so pink is a tint of red. On the opposite end, a shade is any color plus black, and so red plus black is going to make a shade of red, or like a magenta or maroon color there. So as we start taking that knowledge and we go out into the world and we create art or we put together an outfit, we're going to create color schemes, whether we're intentional about it or not. So a color scheme is just an arrangement of colors in a combination. So when you got dressed this morning, you created your own color scheme. You might have looked at your clothes and intentionally picked them out so that way they look good together. You might be matching the color of your shirt to the color of your socks and decide that you don't want to wear pants because it's Zoom and no one sees your pants. So whatever it is, a color scheme is just any combination of colors. Anytime you put colors together, that's a color scheme. There are certain color schemes that work better than others, and there are certain color schemes that are named. So we have a color scheme or a color set of complementary colors, and those are colors that are directly across the color wheel from each other. So like red and green, blue and orange, yellow and purple. And when you mix these colors together, they're going to form a neutral color or like a brown or a gray. So if you don't have like your black, you can start mixing complementary colors, and that's going to get you in the ballpark of that. But complementary colors are a color scheme that are important to know as you're working with art. We also have color schemes called warm colors and a color scheme called cool colors. Warm colors are exactly what you think about. They're colors that are associated with temperature. These are reds, oranges, yellows. Cool colors are making us think of cool temperatures, greens, blues, and violets. So if we throw that on the color wheel there, I like this warm, cool breakdown for the most part. Generally, there are going to be more colors that are associated warm than cool, but you can see our color wheel breakdown. So if we're trying to understand color theory here, I want to back up again and just reiterate this. We need to start with our three primary colors. What are our three primary colors? Red, yellow, and blue. I tend to say red first, and I can go on a whole tangent about where colors come from, but red is the first color that in every language is associated. The word for red is always derived first, and it's oftentimes in close association with blood. But our three primary colors are red, yellow, and blue, or blue, yellow, and red, or yellow, red, and blue. If we mix our primary colors together, we're going to get our secondary colors. So you can see there that if we mix yellow and blue together, we're going to get green. If we mix red and blue, we're going to get purple or violet. And if we mix our yellow and red, we're going to get orange. And then from there, we can add our intermediate colors, and we can imagine this all laid out on a color wheel where those shapes are touching. So I hope that this makes sense as we dive into color theory and working with color. And we're going to start looking at and exploring color more here in our first project. I do want to share just couple other images with you. On the left is a vintage advertisement for a watercolor set that has the three primary colors, and it's showing in that advertisement that you can mix those colors to make other colors. And then on the right is what, in my opinion, is one of the most complete color theory systems, and that's the Munsell color theory system, where you've got value from white to black up down the center. And then on the far outside, you've got the most saturated or the most chroma. So you can see that that blue gets more blue as it goes out and gets less blue or more muted as it comes in. And then the color wheel is actually placed around the outside there. So if you look, we've got that color wheel exactly as we have it around the outside. And so the Munsell color system would essentially be like a giant sphere that you could pull individual colors out as you move around. A couple more vintage illustrations for you there, and wrapping up one more time with the color wheel fading off to the center.